in conversation with Jonnathan Koch, the CEO and the founder of Talent Jenny, and he's a talent specialist. Jonnathan is a founder of two recruitment tech brands and a system specialist with 20 years experience in the recruitment and technology industries. He has keen interest in educating people on the fourth industrial revolution, has taken part in debates on what the fifth industrial revolution might look like. This is, as you know, that the country, the world, and everybody else, we are moving into the fourth industrial revolution. And it has been a monster that everybody else has been wanting to know. What does it bring? What is it all about? And today, in conversation with Mr. Hoch, we're going to be able to hear more from him as to what does the future of work look like, and what is it that we can prepare ourselves for, and what is our lives going to look like as of today. And we've been hit greatly due to COVID-19 with unpreparedness as far as also 4IR is concerned. We found ourselves having to tune in into 4IR much quicker than we thought that we would. And I think these type of conversations are conversations that are helping us to be able to journey and to move on as far as 4IR is concerned. And on that note, I would like to welcome everybody that is part of this conversation, both on Zoom and as well as on all our live platforms, that will be your Facebook and as well as your YouTube. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, guys. All right, so thank you very much for making time for me today. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey into different types of technologies. Just to give you a little bit of a background, and thank you very much, Zaz, for introducing me. I've had about 20 years experience as an entrepreneur, but more specifically over the last about 8 years, I've been involved with tech companies, and one of our products, for instance, was the very first AI-driven recruitment platform in the world. South African developed product. It now has about 30,000 users worldwide and about 1,500 corporate companies using it. So the space around 4IR is something that I'm quite familiar with. If you have any questions later on, please let me know what you'd like to know about, and I'll see if there's any knowledge I have that I can depart with that you find to be of some value. I think to get started, we need to cover a few topics, and we are going to delve into a number of different areas. Naturally, my specialization is technology around recruitment, but bear in mind that it's delved into artificial intelligence, it's delved into video content. So we have a variety of different areas that we've taken advanced technologies, but we've adapted it for a particular industry, and these obviously be adapted for different types of industries. So we do have some good insights. So as we're going through this process, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into the evolution of recruitment and communications, because of course we know that technology is really to a large degree about communication between devices, etc., and communication in general. And understanding the employment landscape, disruption, and of course some trends. And we will show you some advanced trends as well. So evolution of recruitment and communication. This is where it starts to become somewhat interesting. So when we look at the different types of industrial revolutions that we had the mechanization type of industrial revolution, which was like steam power, etc., and some early stage what they called paraffin motors. At that stage, it wasn't petrol motors, it was more paraffin. And that was what we started to see the first stage of production movement, etc. Started focusing on. Then, of course, mass production. When Henry Ford started to produce vehicles, he actually took that model, that production model, from an abattoir, of all places, and then adapted it to vehicle manufacturing. Later on, we start seeing that the third industrial revolution starts taking place, and that's around computer and automation. So it's like your programmable robots that effectively would be able to help in the production line. What we're starting to see now is the cyber physical systems and digital world unfolding. So we have this world that's all attached to a cell phone, but it's not necessarily interacting with anything physical. At the same time, we're seeing a bridge between the physical and exactly that non-physical world that we're referring to. So we can now start speaking to Google Now, and we can request Google Now to do various things for us. My home's now being automated, so I can walk into a room and say, hey, Google, turn on the lights in the bedroom, and the lights will turn on. So, these are the sort of things that we're starting to see, that interaction between technology or software and the physical world, and on demand as well. So this is a very interesting space that we're moving ourselves into. So let's look at communication, right? In the 1500s, you have these Spanish explorers leaving Europe, and 2-3 years later, they would get back to Europe with a message of the places that they had discovered, or what they said that they had discovered. Almost as if no one had been there before, but naturally there were people there. But it's the first time that Europe hears about it. Now, this is 2 to 3 years. The Chinese had a similar exploration period, but that was actually about 300 years before that, which is very, very interesting. So they explored the entire region for a long period of time. And again, the same timelines existed. About 2 or 3 years before word would come back about what they had discovered. Then you start looking at the mining sector opening up about 100, 150 odd years ago. Kimberley's a perfect example. In those days, there weren't many people that had certain types of skills. So what would happen is that they'd need to find people, but the skills weren't available locally. So they had to import skills from the Americas, from Asia, from places like Europe, India, etc. And they'd import those skills into the country, and that process could take anywhere from 6 months to 2 months. So we start seeing that things start speeding up, communication starts speeding up. Then, of course, we start seeing the postal service emerging, and this was specifically because of the fact that the railways were becoming something that could be utilized commercially. And then we start seeing postal services delivering anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on location and so on. And later on, of course, airmail starts. That was in the 1930s. And international mail could then be sent out and received anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. So you have a major shift from 3 odd years over a course of about 400 or 500 years to a couple of weeks for information to flow. And this, of course, is everything that we experienced in the past. Today, the evolution is slightly different. So not too long ago, we started seeing newspapers that became widely circulated, and print that was available. So you could have something, for instance, in Johannesburg being printed, and in Durban, the same print was going live, and people would pick up the newspaper on a Saturday or a Monday or whatever the case is, and have current articles from different places in the country. Of course, fax sped that whole process up. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, I remember fax because I used fax in my business. Some of you guys will probably also remember what a fax machine is. I gave a fax machine I found in my garage the other day to my son, and I tried to explain to him that this was kind of like the way that we sent emails back in the day. And he looked at it and he played around with it, and he said, "But Dad, there's no screen. Do you plug it into the TV or what?" This is the pain we went through. We don't realize it yet, but it was it was quite a painful device to have to contend with. Nowadays, we've got social media sites, we've got various types of apps and emails, we've got job boards, and we've got Gumtrees, and we've got all kinds of things. So if you want to advertise something, you're not advertising it in a newspaper, waiting a week, you're placing an advert on Gumtree or on a job board or wherever, and it's almost instantaneous. You're getting that in feedback very, very soon. Social media, of course, is instant communication, whether it be your thought for the day or whether it be just you reaching out to old friends that you haven't seen for a long time. So these are all important things. But where are we going to, and how will this landscape change? Because inevitably, what we are doing with this is we're saying, okay, if I want something, I need to Google, all right? And that Google process could lead me to 50 or 60 pages before I find precisely what I want. So there are things that we're starting to see. Even in the recruitment space that I play in, we are seeing very similar technologies being adapted for other industries as well. And the first one, of course, is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence in our environment, just to give you an example, what used to take recruitment specialists in a business about 8 hours to complete, and this effectively going through 250 resumes, is now being done in about 10 to 15 minutes flat. And that's all because of the AI. The AI has the ability to read for you and to help you get to a conclusion really fast. The same thing's starting to happen with other types of technologies where AI is being deployed. The other thing is what we call aggregation technology. Now, aggregation technology is basically a technology that finds all the information for you, aggregates it into one place, and then provides you with all the information. And a perfect example of this is, have you guys ever gone into an app or a website called Price Check? So Price Check basically goes and looks at all different websites. You can say, all right, well, I want to get a Samsung TV and these are the specs. And it'll go to Macro and Game and Pick and Pay and whoever it wants to go to. And it'll find all of those TVs that are currently being advertised by those companies and show you what their prices are, so that you can see who's got that particular TV at the best possible price. Now, that's called an aggregation technology. So it aggregates information from various places onto one area. And that is a very interesting tech. In actual fact, the largest non-public IPO, or when I say non-public IPO, it's initial public offering, but it's an initial private offering in China for a business, was for a news aggregator recently, and they raised $31 billion just to get their aggregator started. So it will be aggregation will be one of the largest industries in the world very soon. So when we start looking at data, this is an old chart, and I need you to understand that this chart over here, although it will be impressive once you realize what it's all about, where we are currently, there wasn't enough space on the screen, so I had to cut it a bit short. Okay. What we see over there in yellow is the communication via voice. So that's cell phone calls, etc. What we see in blue is communication from data up until 2014. 2014, look how it started to explode. So in the space of literally, and this is 2010 over here, if we look over here in the middle, that's 2010. All right, 4 years, that explosion. When I say to you that the explosion has been so rapid and so aggressive that I couldn't fit it onto the screen, it looked like there was a little bit of small little dots at the bottom that were in yellow, and you just couldn't see it. It went right off the page. So our use of data is increasing exponentially. And one of the reasons for that is we can make cell phone calls, but via WhatsApp now, just as a perfect example. Okay. And that's just one aspect of it. Wait until you start seeing what happens in the next 15 years with the Internet of Things, when they can actually start printing onto paper microchips and then just slapping it onto a tree that happens to be growing apples or whatever the case is, and then monitor its root system, its liquid flow, the health of the plant, etc., and then feed that back to head office, so that you can actually say, all right, well, that tree in that row needs to be replaced because it's got a disease or a fungal infection or something like that. This is where we're going with technology. Super production. So industry and applications that move into the home. So we start seeing steam trains in the 1820s become commercial entities. So they're no longer just owned by governments. The man on the street can now catch a steam train. And that was kind of that first wave of industrial applications that people were able to embrace. And it's not to say that the steam train only started in 1820. It started a lot more before that. It's just that now we have this period where it becomes feasible. In 1909, we start seeing a new trend start emerge, and that's the electrification, and things like electric appliances become a possibility. So we start seeing for the first time people using an iron, an electric frying pan, etc., etc. So these new technologies, things that we see as everyday items, start becoming used all the way through until the 1960s, 1970s, where for the first time we start seeing something else taking place, and that's basically we start to see the adoption of PCs. Now, you guys might need to move your the video that you might be seeing of us to the other side of the screen, because there might be some content that gets blocked by our videos. But just to give you an idea of what happens next, in 2014, Amazon started to distribute globally Amazon's Alexa. And that was a device similar to the one I'm holding up right over here, which is a Google Home device that could tell you, whatever you want to know, the weather, whatever the case is, want to know the news, and then connect to your house, turn on lights, switch off lights, turn on kettle, etc., etc. So we see that there's this movement now towards this new type of technology that we call the Internet of Things. And that's expected to accelerate quite rapidly as technology accelerates, all the way to 2045. And at this point in time, 2045, it's expected that we would be in a space where the singularity will be a adopted norm. Now, that's an interesting place, and we're going to just touch on that very briefly because it's so important to understand what the singularity is. And bear in mind, we're talking about a period that is literally 25 years from now. So we will see it in our lifetimes, and it will greatly affect our children. Okay? But to explain that, let me first ask you something significant. Does anybody know what happened with artificial intelligence in 2015? Something significant happened at that point, and I don't expect any of you guys to know what it was. But if you do, please just raise your hand. If not, not a problem. All right, so I'll quickly tell you then. In 2015, computers or a computer system using artificial intelligence became as intelligent as a mouse. And that might sound quite insignificant, but considering how much computing power it would take to actually mimic the intelligence of a living organism, it's quite impressive. The question now remains, at what point do machines become potentially as intelligent as a human being? And that's the next question that we need to try and answer. And the answer is 2023, 3 years from now. So in 2023, we'll have the processing power to match the intelligence of a human being. And I'm not even touching at this point on quantum computing. Quantum computing could change that completely. But we're not going to get into that at this point in time. So in 2023, we start seeing artificial intelligence becoming as impressively intelligent as a human being, which is quite great. It's quite a thing to step back and observe. But that's one human being. Just remember, there's 7 or 8 billion of us on this planet. So the next big question is, at what point do we start seeing that computer intelligence becomes more intelligent than the combined intelligence of all humans on the planet? And that's when we start seeing the singularity emerging in 2045. So in 2045, all of this changes. Everything that we've become accustomed to, the way that we operate, our jobs, etc., that all changes. And we need to somehow prepare ourselves for that in the future. Okay. The question is, how do we prepare ourselves? That's a question that's up for debate. Recently, I spoke to a guy in the States who's slowly but surely been accumulating stocks in companies that are developing artificial intelligence. And he just said to me that that's the only way that he thinks he's going to be able to actually afford his lifestyle in the future, is if he accumulates the likes of Google, Amazon, Baidu, and a number of other stocks. So we'll see what it all turns out to be like when it comes to 2045. But what we do need to realize immediately is that the type of jobs that we have now will more than likely no longer exist. So the Internet of Things, a lot of people are aware of the Internet of Things. They're not necessarily familiar with what it actually means for them. So I've got a little video I'm going to play. Just let me know if you can hear it.
The Internet isn't just about computers anymore. Now, all kinds of everyday objects can connect to the Internet, including cars, thermostats, sporting equipment, refrigerators, and even shoes. This is known as the Internet of Things. Now, you may be wondering, why would shoes need to connect to the Internet? Well, the shoes can collect data, like how many steps you take, which can be viewed from another Internet-connected device, like a smartphone. All the metrics collected by the shoes can be analyzed to tell you how many calories you've burned, give you personalized fitness advice, and much more. But the Internet of Things isn't limited to consumer products. There are city trash cans that send alerts when they need to be emptied, sensors on bridges that check for stress or damage to its structure, and many more examples extending to healthcare, manufacturing, and agriculture, among others. Unfortunately, there are also new security concerns. For example, if you have internet-connected locks, a hacker might be able to unlock your front door remotely. And there's the...
Oops.
Of privacy. All of these devices are collecting large amounts of data that can capture your actions and location throughout the day. Often, we don't exactly know all that is being collected or how this information is being used. The Internet of Things is going to grow exponentially over the next few years, bringing with it new benefits and challenges.
Okay, so let's understand the employment landscape. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a step back, going back about 12 years, and you'll remember that there was an economic crash that led to a deep recession back in 2008. We also had, in 2008, load shedding starting. Okay, now this is all employment because we need to understand there's a point that's going to be built up around this, and it's very important, and specifically around automation that we're going to be discussing this. So between 2009 and 2010, labor brokers are restricted by government. And what happened as a result of the crash is that we found that the exchange rate was sitting at about 6 Rand to the dollar. After the crash, it settled at about 8 Rand 50 to the dollar. So there was a depreciation of the Rand against the dollar. And as a result of that depreciation, things like food went up in inflation. Over that 2-year period, food and other living expenses, including things that we take for granted, like coal for power stations, went up by about 30%. And of course, unions decided that we need to have an increase in wages, quite rightfully so because of the inflation. And they needed to find a way of getting that income for their members. And government responded and saying, well, the country can't actually afford it. The solution was at that point in time to ban labor brokers. And yes, they were, and they did point fingers at some guys that were involved with unfair labor practice. But what happened was that they said, well, these companies are making a profit of providing labor. So we need to take that profit and rather distribute that amongst the people that are being employed. The problem was, however, that a lot of the companies that were using labor brokers needed a flexible workforce. And they were needing a flexible workforce because a lot of their work was seasonal. I'll give you a perfect example. You look at SAB Miller, or what's now InBev. They needed a flexible workforce because for about 5 months of the year, people consumed more beer than any other time of the year. So over the summer months, people consumed a lot more beer, and their staff complement would increase by roughly about 1/3, and so would the staff complements of all their suppliers in their supply chain. And that was just one example. Unfortunately, what happened is that instead of employing more permanent people and increasing salaries, the employers turned around and they went the automation route. So they chose to actually automate because it was too difficult and too expensive to take more people on than it was to automate. And we lost roughly about 1 million jobs in the process. So these are some of the things that we need to consider because we are currently in this automation trend. And I'm going to give you a specific example just now of what happens with automation so that you have a real world idea of how it works. So 2020, we have the COVID crisis. Some experts are now saying that there's a possibility we could see 50% unemployment. Coming out of this, again, people are going to look for ways to automate because of the expense of using human beings in the process. And this is an example that we have over here. This example was over a 10-year period from roughly 2008 to 2018. And during that period, the unemployment rate increased 50%. In other parts of the world, like Germany, you can see the unemployment rate actually decreased over that same period. And in actual fact, when that crash came, there was a very slight increase from 7.8 to 8.1% of unemployment, and then a decreasing trend continued beyond that. That was in Germany. America had seen something similar, but what you need to understand about America's real unemployment rate, and this is where it gets interesting, is that they don't record people as being unemployed beyond a certain period of 6 months. So you can still be unemployed in the USA, but according to the US data, the government data, they don't account you as being unemployed any longer. Now, what is interesting about this is that they have been in a trend an upward trend of decreasing employment since the internet actually started. So this is important to understand. The trend is firmly in place when it comes to technology. Technology is going to erode jobs everywhere we go. And this is why it's so important to start getting our children and our students involved with technology across all fields. So here's a little clip that I want to play with you regarding natural language pattern recognition. This is a Google innovation. And just to give you an idea, one of the largest outsourced businesses in South Africa currently with global clients happens to be call center operators. And the reason I have this over here is simply because I want to illustrate to you what is coming for that sector. It's one of the largest employers in South Africa.
60% of small businesses don't have an online booking system set up. We think AI can help with this problem. So let's go back to this example. Let's say you want to ask Google to make you a haircut appointment on Tuesday between 10 and noon. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now? Okay, we have it 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, now imagine that. And that technology is already, if you've got a Google Assistant account, it's embedded into your phone already. So that's if you've got a Google Assistant account. Now, what you need to understand about that is that that application, and I've seen it live, will go and make all the bookings that you need. Everything that you need to book will be booked for you. Your Uber appointment will be booked. Everything will be taken care of. So just picture that for a second. You're in an environment where you need to go and make an appointment with a hairdresser or a restaurant. It makes a phone call for you, organizes your Uber, makes sure that your guest has been Ubered, everything's been taken care of, you arrive, everyone arrives on time, sends calendar reminders in your calendar, and make sure that everything is coordinated smoothly. That's exactly what is going on with this technology. All right, so next, disruption. How do we spot it? What is it? What are we looking out for? Well, the things that we need to look out for when it comes to disruption is, has the same technology or technique or product been used for a long period of time? This is very, very important to actually ask. Think about things like replacement of a phone by WhatsApp calls. Other things to consider is the cost versus benefits of using the current technique, product, or technology high? Think about the cost of postage through post office versus email. So whenever we're looking at it, we need to start asking, has technology got to a point where it's now going to make it easier, faster, and cheaper? Does new technology suggest an alternative? And here's an interesting one. Think Uber versus Tesla. Now, I know a lot of people are saying Uber versus Tesla. Uber's a new product. Yes, it is. It's only been around in South Africa for about 4 years now. You think Tesla, right? Tesla's a new product. We don't even have it yet. But how are these two, significant? Why are we saying Uber versus Tesla? Now, that's an interesting one. And to illustrate that, I'd like you to watch this little video.
I feel very confident predicting autonomous rover taxis for Tesla next year. Not an all jurisdictions because we won't have regulatory approval everywhere. But I'm confident we'll have at least regulatory approval somewhere literally next year. So we did it. We're going to do the robotaxi thing too. Only criticism, and it's a fair one, and sometimes I'm not on time. But I get it done. The fundamental message that consumers should be taking today is that it's financially insane to buy anything other than a Tesla. It'll be like owning a horse in 3 years. I mean, fine if you own a horse, but you should go into it with that expectation.
Okay, so just on that point, let me tell you what's happening with regards to Tesla. Tesla has now created cars that for the last 10 years have been learning to drive themselves. So every single vehicle that they produce has got the mechanism to teach it driver behavior and how to identify obstacles, etc. This year, they will be releasing complete automated cars like Uber. These cars will effectively eliminate the need for the use of a driver. They will also ensure that the vehicle itself can be used for 1 million miles, which is 1.6 million kilometers of usage. Now, we all want to get to a car. By the time it gets to 200,000 kilometers, the car's falling apart, right? Doesn't matter which car you had. I used to have a Mercedes-Benz that did exactly that to me. With these cars, you'll be able to comfortably take it to 1 million miles without having any serious problems with it. Yes, you'll be able to change tires and so on, but it's got no oil, no fuel, none of that. So moving parts, engine parts, very seldom will have any issues. And it'll be able to make you money. So the estimation is that it should be able to generate for you about $30,000 per year before tax. So your vehicle then becomes an asset that is used as an Uber to ferry other people around and, of course, make you money. And that's where we're going. The technology, Uber, has already been disrupted by Tesla. In the next 3 to 4 years, Uber will more than likely no longer exist. Just consider that. Now, here's a case study that I want to take you through. It's something that we all heard about in the media. We all know what happened with Lonmin. We all know about Marikana. And this is a very interesting one because back in 2012, Lonmin employed 36,523 people. And that's very, very important to note. Large mining operation, of course, large employer of staff. Then what happens, they start to look at things like automation. And this becomes a trend, of course, as a result of the fact that they need to remain profitable in very difficult circumstances. And by 2016, that number dropped to 24,713 people. So they had lost about 12,000 jobs in the space of about 4 years. Now, consider that in 2012, Lonmin started the automation of their smelter. At the same time, I had the privilege of going to Joy Global in 2012, where they were building machinery that would do the mining for them underground. So large scale, very large scale mining machinery that would literally bore through the ore and then take all the ore and push it out the back and then effectively send it up to the smelter. And as a result of that, Lonmin reduced another 2 years later, their staff complement to 13,000 people. So in the space of 6 years, they went from 36,000 people to 13,000 people and finally returned back to profitability and were sold in that year for $101 million, which is about 1.8 billion rand. Which is still, considering the sort of mining that they do, quite a cheap price for a company of that size. But of course, they've got a tainted history. So a very interesting time for the company, having gone from large-scale employment to reducing it down to 13,000 people. And they did it in 6 years. And this is why automation is going to threaten most jobs in some way or form unless we are upskilled and understand technology. This might look like it's mechanization only, but trust me when I say to you that if you look at what Google is producing and other companies, I just showed you what Google's voice-activated system can do. Imagine what it's going to do for the call center industry. And that's one of their targets. They're going for the call center industry. So technology at this point in time is being developed to replace our regular jobs that we have been trained up for. We need to start looking at combining what we are studying with technology. So when it comes to automation readiness, this is an interesting one for us. South Africa currently sits at number 22 in the world for automation readiness. South Korea is sitting at number 1, followed by Germany and Singapore. Now, automation readiness, what does that basically mean? It basically means that when it comes to all the countries in the world, we sit at number 22 in the sense that we can automate a lot of our processes and have shown a willingness to do so. But we need to understand that this willingness to a large degree was not driven by innovation, but driven by necessity. Unlike in South Korea, Germany, Japan, Singapore, and other areas of the world, one of the biggest reasons that people were forced into this position was because of massive strikes that went on for long periods of time. Labor union strikes, changes in government policy, etc. So this is the reason why South Africa is sitting at number 22. It is an interesting space for us to be in. What is also interesting is to see what's happening in other places in the world. Like, for instance, if you look at number 6, it's a small little country called Estonia. And Estonia is the smallest company in the EU. Now, to give you an idea, when we say the smallest company, in the EU, we're basically saying that it's the smallest country in the EU. We're basically saying that it's a country of about 800,000 people. And what the EU did is they said, well, we need to look at how this new industry, this 4IR development is going to affect countries within the EU. So we'll go and choose a country and we'll fully automate as much as possible. So government to a large degree has been fully automated. It was one of the first places in the world where AI was deployed in government to help make decisions, to alleviate the pressure on government. The cost of government was reduced dramatically. In actual fact, in some cases, they've actually reduced the size of government in certain towns and or villages and cities within Estonia. Currently, it's sitting at number 6, and they reckon that it's a model that can work very, very well if the people are upskilled correctly. So that's one of the things that they did from a university perspective. Anyways, moving on. Let's have a look at current trends. So this is the current trends that we are busy looking at for the next couple of years, and this illustrates the sort of positions that are in demand. Now, the light blue that you see there, which makes up about 40% of all the positions, are all in tech. The longest line that you see there is for full stack developers. Full stack developers, for every one job for every one full stack developer, there are 5 jobs currently available. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at this. The trend is towards technology. You also have things like cybersecurity, cyber engineers, cloud software engineers, etc., etc. So 40% of these jobs currently sit just in the development, the software development space. The dark blue lines are for people that are more involved with graphic design, UI design, etc. Again, design work, art, etc., but specifically focused on technology. So it's how does your interface for that app look? You know what I'm saying? It's all about that sort of design. That button needs to look a certain way, but I want it to be more of a 3D rendering. Or when we get into things like augmented reality, how does that look? Who creates that graphic interface? And that's where we will see all of this. What is also interesting, of course, and there's a reason for this, is we see one of the high demand jobs in the States currently is commercial truck drivers. Now, a lot of people have said to me, why a commercial truck driver? That makes no sense. Well, the reality of the matter is that we need commercial truck drivers to take our e-commerce goods and deliver it to us. So that's where it's coming from. So e-commerce again, technology related, is driving commercial truck driver adoption. This is the only current space where you'll actually see this sort of position that's in demand, and that's temporary. And I'm going to show you why, bearing in mind that Amazon apparently has just put in a bid for a company called Zoox, which is a robotic vehicle company, and is ZOOX. You guys can Google it when you got a chance. That means that pretty soon Amazon, if they get their way, will no longer be using truck drivers. And I'm actually going to illustrate that a little bit more for you right here.
It's designed to be safe. It's quiet and totally predictable, down to the cost savings. Nothing similar to what you've seen from us before. In fact, it's impossible to try.
This is Vera, an autonomous vehicle. Vera is part of a larger system and has the potential to optimize transports in highly repetitive, short-distance transport flows with large volumes of goods, such as ports, factory areas, and logistic megacenters, offering better delivery precision and flexibility. The autonomous electric vehicles operate together in a network and are connected through a cloud-based service and management center.
Whoops. So we get the idea here with Vera. We understand what's going on. Basically, what's going to be happening, the new trends that we're going to be seeing, is that these vehicles are going to become fully automated. Okay, we are going to be seeing a trend away from labor practices, etc. And we need to be aware of this right now. We need to be aware of it. This trend is coming. We have no choice. It's going to hit us. Thankfully, from a South African perspective, we are roughly about 5 years behind the curve at this point in time, which means that we've got about 10 years to actually get our country ready, to start educating people in the right way, to get them on board, and to make sure that they're in the right space. Government needs to be part of that picture. But we've got about 10 years. After that, it's game over. We will never be able to catch up if we aren't ready within the next 10 years. It'll be game over for the country. But I'm pretty sure that there are some people in government already that understand this and have already seen these trends and probably working towards it. At least I hope they are. So where to next with these mega trends? Well, here's where we see software demand. We expect that AI programmers are going to, the demand for them is going to increase by 200% year on year over the next 8 years. And that's an exponential growth for AI programmers. We're also seeing this very similar trend for full stack developers currently, and that's going to continue for another 8 years. Web application developers, again, developers in demand going forward. Software process automation. That's, again, another interesting one. We've heard of robotic process automation from some people, but software process automation, very similar. It's basically the automation of software to do certain functions. So it'll continue where you would leave off and you'd say, this is what I want you to do. It'll then start processing information and working for you automatically. Then we have things like the mass adoption of AR, augmented reality. And I will show you a video towards the end that will illustrate what I'm referring to when I talk about augmented reality, because that'll be an absolute game changer. Of course, user interface design. So design and creativity is very, very important. And we expect to see engineering and automation to a large degree taking place in mining, manufacturing, and agriculture. And these are the places traditionally that have been considered to be large employers of unskilled labor. What we need to understand about things like agriculture is that the largest unemployment wave ever experienced happened about 120 years ago in agriculture. At that point, 90% of people stayed in rural environments, and within the space of about 25 years, that shifted to where 80% of people lived in urbanized environments, and only 20% of them lived in rural environments. And that accelerated over a period of time in other parts of the world. In South Africa, we lagged, so we only started to see that trend really starting to materialize from the 1970s, 1980s, and so on. The agricultural sector, however, is going to be changed again. I've recently been able to have a chat with some people in the States who have got the most productive pepper farm in the world. Everything is grown hydroponically. Not a single person actually works inside the farm. It's all using robotics. So even the things that even the picking of the peppers is done by robots. So you've got to understand that this trend is accelerating and it's going to hit us very soon. Robotic engineering, of course, becomes a major trend, and of course demands for that sort of skills very, very important. Web application developments and other key languages are important. Internet of Things, hardware design, engineering, etc., and of course blockchain. A lot of people think when they hear blockchain, they just think Bitcoin. Please understand, blockchain is going to drive the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Things is expected to be a $15 trillion a year business. All right, so the Internet of Things is where everything is connected to everything, from your shoes to your watch to the tree outside. There'll even be a sensor on your grass that says, well, your grass is too long, and the lawnmower would go out and automatically cut your grass for you, just to give you an idea. That's what the power of the Internet of Things has in store for us. Okay, so blockchain, of course, is, in my opinion, going to be one of the biggest commercial drivers that we'll see emerging over the next 10 to 15 years. All right, so what threatens our status and keeps us either moving forward into the fourth industrial revolution or back? A few things, and this is a global thing. It's not specific to South Africa, understand, but government policy changes. Any government in the world that changes their policies negatively will be affecting this general trend. Union demands. So there's going to be an increase in union demands as a result of joblessness. And we need to understand that this is going to happen. It's almost unavoidable. Some countries are already playing around with the universal basic income as a result of what they're expecting. And this is something that we probably need to have a look at some point. Unfortunately, we are not in America. We are not a China. We are not a European nation that can just print money. Because unfortunately, inflation does affect us pretty harshly if we do. Local recession. Obviously, this is a major one. If there's a local recession as a result of bad policies or just generally natural disasters or anything else that might potentially happen, that can actually affect our move forward. Global recession, even more so. Educational evolution is very, very important. So we need to make sure that our people are educated in the right way for the future technologies. And I mean aggressively. I don't even mean exposure to a little bit about what it is. We need to actually look at what we are teaching our kids, and we need to say, make the change now. One of the reasons I'm in the Western Cape right now is because there's a school down here in the Western Cape that is tech-driven. And I semi-migrated from Gauteng, where all my business interests were, to the Western Cape so that my kids could have an education for what's coming. And they're doing everything from robotics to programming. They do technical drawing. They do all the other mathematics and so on, but they even have a genetics department. All right, this is what we need to be doing for our kids. At university level, we need to amp that up. We need to really rapidly move away from the old way of teaching and exposing people to technology that no longer works, or that is still being utilized to a lesser degree. Think of it this way, right? If you can Google it, why are you learning it? Okay, we need to be educating in a way that helps us progress faster and makes a young person's mind more active and more hungry to explore new ideas. That's what the fourth industrial revolution is about. All right, restrictions on entrepreneurship. We've seen this in some countries around the world. We see it even here in South Africa. I remember having or seeing a documentary on Elon Musk. And you must understand, back in the 90s, I believe he was still in South Africa. He then ended up getting an opportunity to go to the States, and he took it. He built up, of course, PayPal and other businesses. And when they asked him why he didn't stay in his own country, he said that, good ideas and money flows to countries that help to facilitate the growth of entrepreneurs. And he was very, very right. The businesses that Elon Musk have created over the last, I think, 20 odd years. Their value on the New York Stock Exchange is estimated to be half of the combined value of all businesses on the JSE. Okay, just bear that in mind just for a second. His businesses that he's created are worth about $380 billion US. That's the value that he's created. Imagine if an entrepreneur had all the opportunities here in a country like South Africa, what he could have done for a company or for a country like ours. But the reality is that it's not there. We've got high taxation rates. We've got high interest on loans. It's very difficult to do business here for a lot of entrepreneurs. So the other thing that could restrict us greatly is slow adoption by government of the Internet of Things. It's so important for government to embrace this as well, and to help upskill people within government departments so that they are aware of how it works, so they can deploy it, etc. So the fourth industrial revolution, massive opportunity for a lot of people, very scary for other people. The key to it, though, is education. If we don't educate ourselves properly, then the fourth industrial revolution becomes a major pain point for a lot of people. There's no reason in my mind why South Africa can't play a leading role in it. The question is, are we going to? Because there's going to be about 60 million jobs, new jobs, that are created out of this process globally. 60 million brand new jobs that have never existed before. Okay, if you are ready for it, you can take the lion's share of this. At the moment, South Africa is not ready for it. At the moment, we are still on the verge of it. But 60 million new jobs will be created. Bearing in mind, please, that this is only about 17% of the jobs that will be lost. So the vast majority of jobs will actually be lost as a result of it. So we need to make sure that we are educating in the right way so people can embrace this. And then finally, we mentioned augmented reality just a moment ago, and this is what it's all about. So I'll show you augmented reality, and you guys can tell me what you think afterwards. And I'll actually talk about this very briefly afterwards.
This is an absolute game changer. So this is it, the Microsoft HoloLens. I've attached it to my laptop, and I'm going to move the camera behind me so you can see everything that I'm seeing when I try this on, so I can demonstrate to you how this works. Okay, let's get ready. So the first thing I want to show you is how I interact with the HoloLens from a business perspective. So here I'm going to open Excel, and this is directly connected to Office 365. It's a bit difficult to talk and do this at the same time. So here I can access all of my work documents, and I can make this pretty much any size I want to. And I can push it farther away or keep it nice and close. And then you've got these really cool aspects like holograms, which are just so clear and so surreal. Here I've got a Word document. Again, this is using the very clever HoloLens technology where it maps every object in your room. So you can pinpoint and place holograms anywhere. Here you'll see a really cool satellite. And there's a man doing weights here. The drone is real, by the way. The man doing weights is not real. Here I've got a YouTube video open on a multiple Microsoft Edge browser. And if I click play, you should see my holiday snaps or holiday video. Now, to put it in perspective, I've got a 60-inch TV in this room, and this is probably about 100 inches. So you can see that you would have thought that at one point we won't need TVs and monitors anymore, because I can have as many monitors, as many TVs as I want, not taking up any space or electricity. What I want to try and get across here is how clear this is. It's so weird that it's right in front of me. It's almost hard to explain that it feels real. It feels like I'm actually looking at a monitor. Now, this one just blows my mind. You can zoom into a number of galaxies in our universe, and obviously I've gone into our solar system. Now, again, when I click to look at more detail at our sun, it's probably the best visual I've ever seen of our sun, including the TV. And I'm hoping that this video will do it justice, and you can see the solar flares erupting or shooting out of the sides. Now, my favourite planet, like most people's, is Saturn. And I had this on yesterday on the train. And it's just so surreal having this 3D planet standing right in front of me.
Okay, guys, so you're getting the idea. This AR technology, augmented reality technology, is going to hit mainstream. In actual fact, Apple, I believe, next year is going to be releasing AR glasses, mainstream glasses. You'll be able to walk down a street in a city, and you'll be able to identify people that you know from Facebook. Will automatically ping them, and you'll be able to see, okay, well, that person that I know is just around the corner, and go and meet them for a cup of coffee. Or you'll be able to walk past a shop and you see whatever specials that they have based on what they've actually put onto Foursquare. So this augmented reality world that we're moving into is going to take the digital world and it's going to take the real world and merge them to the point that we will no longer be able to tell the difference between the different worlds. And the more these devices become normalized and become adopted, the more we'll find that they become an everyday tool, to the point that we'll eventually be accepting implants for augmented lenses into our eyes. And that's already started. They've already started, Samsung's already started to develop that technology. So to give you a perfect idea, you could decide, okay, well, I'm going to go and paint the walls of my house on the inside. I'm going to make that one green, that one blue. And every person that walks into your house will see exactly those colors that you've selected, okay? Unless they don't have an implant or unless they don't have any lenses, and they'll see exactly what you want them to see. In actual fact, you will see it as well. You will never know any different. The only people that will know any different is those that haven't accepted any implants or don't have any lenses embedded. And that's the world that we're moving into. You'll be able to put huge TVs. So imagine companies that are out there, like Samsung, and this is probably why they've started to develop the lenses already. They know that they won't be selling TVs forever. People won't need them anymore. And these are the important things to consider, guys. The technology is moving very, very, very rapidly. We need to be part of that process. You can't ignore it, and you need to make sure that you're ready for it. Okay. And that's it from me, guys.
Oh, wow. I am overwhelmed, but I'm also excited at the same time. This was quite impactful, insightful, empowering, and life-changing. And I think every time we sit and listen to these 4IR conversations, there's just so much that comes on forth. And there's just so much information that comes, becomes part of our lives, and we get informed with. And it opens up your eyes to a lot of avenues that we never really thought, we didn't even know existed. I'm going to go into our Q&A. There's a couple of questions for you, and that I would like to tackle together. We don't have much time, but let's try and see how many we can be able to pull through.
Cool. I'll spend more time if you need me to. I don't mind.
Okay. Thank you so much for availing yourself. We really appreciate it. On the Q&A side, I've got a couple of questions from an anonymous attendee. The first question says, so do you suggest that automating of the recruitment space may do away with HR, or is there still opportunity for these systems to be used along with human beings? Okay,
it's a very good question. So I think that the more you upskill and you embrace the technology, the more opportunity you create for yourself. I would not say that the technology is going to take away every job, but if you look at recruitment, for instance, recruitment agencies, and I used to own recruitment agencies, so I know a little bit about it, to a large degree are no longer around. They're there, and there are still some around it, but think about companies like Kelly. Kelly in this country had a turnover of 1.8 billion. 2008 happened, the crash. Within 3 or 4 years, they had a turnover of less than 300 million, and now you don't hear about them anymore. True. So this trend is away from recruitment agents, and it's being adopted, or those skills, those recruitment skills have been pulled into a corporate, and the corporates are utilizing those people. The problem is that when you look at the corporate recruitment, corporate recruiters are expected to do a hell of a lot more then just find people and forward them on. They need to be part of the interviewing process. They need to be part of a whole lot of different processes. And as a result of that, you end up with a lot of work and a lot of things being expected. And we need to somehow try and speed up that process for them, for those talent acquisition experts. So, and this is what's happening with all different types of positions across the board. And technology does that. So it's going to enhance the experience, at the same time save the companies a lot more money. It's going to obviously have an effect on recruitment agents, but I think if you are a recruitment specialist in the corporate, you'd probably be able to benefit and so will your business.
Okay, thank you for that. There's another question also from anonymous attendee. It says, Mr. Koch, it is really incredible to see what the world has been doing regarding change, especially Tesla. But now my question is, on how will the self-driving cars factor in South Africa, provided that there are still biological biases in AI, where it can recognize some and not recognize some people? And I guess this goes into that. I think there was also a knowledge, or maybe an idea, that there's a certain tribe of people that AI is not able to be able to recognize. Has that been sorted out, or what has been the issue there?
So what you're referring to is that's probably about 4 or 5 years old now. Those issues to a large degree have been sorted out. I mean, a self-drive automated car has got to a point now where it can actually tell that there's a piece of plastic on the road, like a plastic packet on the road. And it can monitor its movement to see if it actually has something solid in it or not. So we're at a point now where the technology is ready, and to a large degree in certain areas has been adopted. So the US military is already using it. There are mines in Chile that are fully automated. Like literally, there's not a single truck driver on an open cast mine, one of the mines that I had a look at in Chile. Not one. They operate something like 50 open cast vehicles. You know those huge Caterpillar trucks? Those massive ones.
Yeah.
You stand next to the tire, and the tire is like almost a story high. Incident in 3 years, one incident. And that was only because they lost signal because of cloud coverage. And that was a very small incident. Other than that, there's no collisions, wear and tear on the vehicles are down, et cetera, et cetera. So we are talking about a technology that's ready. The only thing that needs to happen now is regulatory approval. So we need to see countries, municipalities around the world saying, okay, we accept that it's ready. We'll allow you to use it. That's the only barrier to entry right now. But you look at the likes of Zoox, you look at the likes of Tesla, you look at the likes of a number of other vehicle manufacturers or robotic car manufacturers or people that are experimenting with the technology, they'll tell you that they're ready. And it is a good technology.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that. Another question says, I have asked this question before, but the presenter of the day failed to answer my question. So I have been interested on how China has changed their informal sector into a single system economy, where an average lady who sells veggies and fruits uses a QR code incorporated into the WeChat app and allows people to buy using their smartphones. So do you think this can be applicable in South Africa? And what would you suggest thereof?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is applicable. I mean, you look at Zappa. Zappa's already here. Zappa is a similar QR code system. You can utilize it. It's not an issue. It's just user adoption. That's all. The technology's here. What China has done very successfully is they've made sure that government is involved with business at every level. So where they see if there's a good idea, government goes and invests in those entrepreneurs. And I'll give you an example. It's not just local. So in South Africa, there's a company called Eureka. You might if you go to Builders Warehouse or to most hardware stores, you'll see they've got those little orange packets with little screws and stuff. Now, Eureka used to always occupy a small little shelf section in any major hardware store. Now you go in and they're pretty much like half of the aisle. What happened with that company probably about 10 years ago is that they were wanting to expand and they wanted funding from the Department of Trade and Industry. And for 2 years, they battled to get funding. secure premises. There were all these different requirements that the government wanted to have in place, et cetera, et cetera. So for 2 years, they had put their expansion plans on hold. As a result of that, they thought, well, we'll just go to China and see what's available in China. Just as a sort of an excursion, go there, have a look and see, what China can offer and if it's feasible. Driven on the back of the fact that it was taking them so long to actually get approval here locally. They went to China. They arrived in China. They had someone from the Chinese government waiting for them, who escorted them to go and look at property. They had equipment manufacturers come and speak to them about their specs. They had their labor department and the labor brokers that they met with, introduced them to potential labor forces. The government departments that they had there helped them draw up a business plan all within the 2 weeks, secure the premises and everything, and expose them to a potential clientele in the USA. 2 weeks later, when they came back to South Africa, they moved their entire operation to China.
Oh my God.
Financing and everything was put in place. Now that's efficiency. So when we are looking at deployment of technology, when we are looking at the deployment of new ideas that are going to affect people in this country, we need to make sure that government is ready and on board to help implement those sort of things. Otherwise, we'll continue to hemorrhage jobs and we'll obviously continue to fall further and further behind. But it's not to say that we can't. There's no doubt in my mind that we can. We just need to make sure that there's a focused approach. And I don't think that that's necessarily happening right now, but it probably is. There's probably a drive towards that, and I'm sure government has a plan. I've been hearing a lot about what government's planning to do in the technology space. So I'm sure that they've got a plan in place. And I think time will tell. I think it'll be interesting to see how things pan out in South Africa. So to go back to your question, the technology is here. What we need is we need to make sure that the right infrastructure is available, that people have access to it, and that there's cheap data. Cheap data is a major thing. South Africa pays way too much for data. You can't expect a young guy that's earning 6,000 Rand a month to spend, 500 Rand in data every month. That's just ridiculous.
That's true.
So yeah, we need to address that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. There's another question from John T. Sass. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The question is, how do we as students get ourselves equipped as the education system is currently failing us? Okay.
So my thoughts on that are really quite simple. If you feel that right now your curriculum is not taking you in that direction, then you need to start doing something. Take on a couple of online courses. There's, you can do online courses through Unity, or you can do online courses through various internet-based programming companies. They'll actually take you through like programming for Python or Java, whatever the case is. But you've got to start incorporating programming languages. You've got to start playing around with these sort of technologies and getting a better understanding for them. It's going to become very difficult to find a job in the next 10 years if you don't have a tech angle to what you're doing. One of the areas, like we mentioned earlier, HR department. So, I've recently had a very interesting discussion with the most in-demand HR type jobs that are currently existing and emerging. And one of them is HR information system specialist. So just to give you an idea, that's someone that's involved in HR, but is involved with HR information and the systems that record that information and help to make HR easier and better. So that person that I spoke to at the time was explaining to me that the people that they're employing all did additional things over and above their degree so they could become more tech savvy. And that's the approach that we've got to be taking. We cannot stop learning. If you stop learning now during this revolution, this tech revolution, if you stop learning now, you are done for in the next 5 to 10 years. You've got to be upskilling yourself in the tech space. Hold on to what you're doing. If you're studying to become an engineer, hold on to it, but study programming. Because I can tell you right now that the Internet of Things is going to drive engineering going forward. Your data is going to come from that. So you've got to marry the two. The same with HR, the same with pretty much anything, accounting. Bidvest Advisory Service is currently building an AI-based auditing bot. That AI-based auditing bot is expected to replace 9 out of 10 auditors and just have an auditor to make sure that the bot is doing the audit correctly and that there aren't any mistakes in the audit. That's it. So you're literally saying that firms like PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, KPMG, these firms are going to be under threat very soon.
Sure.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think it has been said that in 2020, we were going to find ourselves in a position where we have 5 generations in a workplace. That would be your traditionalists, your baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Generation Z. And there's a question now that is coming forth from Theodora. And she says, for people who are over 55, what is your advice career-wise, since things will change drastically in the next 5 years?
It is a very, very good question. So I would say look at the sort of experience that you currently have. Now, we all develop experience over a period of time. That has some sort of value. How do you take that experience and then take it out and take it back to the market? So my father's in his 60s. I'm very proud of him because he's just started a business. It was a business that people had a lot of interest in, so he raised a hell of a lot of money as a result of that. But all of his years' experience without tech took him to a point where he started to realize, but actually tech can do a lot of what I'm doing. And a lot of the younger people will definitely appreciate that. So he's gone and he's created a tech product around a old industry and has taken it to market. So we need to be innovating in that sense. I can guarantee you that just as a perfect example, 10 years ago, guys that were in their 50s and 60s, all right, that couldn't use a PC and insisted on having a personal assistant, they lost their jobs and got retrenched. Okay. Because they weren't prepared to take that leap. You've got to be prepared to take that leap. That's so important. So take that leap. Just sit down and think about what it is that you've been doing and what you could be doing to make it better. If you're in a corporate environment, you more than likely end up leading a project that will give you credibility. If you're an entrepreneur, create a product that you can take to market.
Wow. Okay, that's quite great. You spoke a bit about educational evolution, and I think you've touched greatly on what students or learners should be doing. But there's a question here also that says, our education system is not geared for this change. What advice will you give to educators?
Well, what advice I think the educators need to adopt this particular advice is educate yourself.
Okay.
You've got a responsibility to educate youngsters coming through that want to be upskilled and have a future. You need to be taking responsibility for it. Your curriculum needs to change. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I moved provinces just so that I could get my kids to a school that had a curriculum that was part of this fourth industrial revolution.
Sure.
You need to be doing something about it. And you need to speak to your rectors, speak to whoever's in charge of your departments and say, we need to revise this and fast. If you don't, I guarantee you that in 10 years' time, it's game over. I guarantee you. Because other countries, like, I'll give you a perfect example. For the last 10 years, and I've got friends that live in the States. I lived in America for a year, and I'm still in contact with those people. For the last 10 years, they've been teaching robotics and programming at schools.
Sure.
From the age of 13, the kids are learning to program. Now, where are we? If you're in the tertiary environment, what we should really be doing is saying to people, okay, your 3-year degree is now a 4-year degree. Your first year, we're going to just put you into tech, teach you how to program, teach you how to do this, teach you how to do that, so that you upskill. Then you can layer some of the other stuff on top of it, but combine it again with tech. I'd love to know how many courses are there currently in South Africa, outside of Stellenbosch University, where you can learn about the Internet of Things and how to build and program devices. How many people are going for that? I know Stellenbosch University has got a massive department right now, and they're innovating quite a lot. But I'm not hearing about these things like they're mainstream anymore. There used to be, the idea of it was mainstream, you know, in other parts of the world. When I speak to my colleagues in the UK, I speak to guys in Dubai, even in Mauritius, they tell me, listen, this is mainstream now. I'm not hearing it. I'm not hearing that mainstream echo here in South Africa. And that concerns me. So what are we doing about that? What are we doing to actually make sure that the Internet of Things is something that's taught? That's what I want to know.
I think having said that, I've seen quite a lot of work that University of Johannesburg has been also putting out there as far as 4IR is concerned. But I guess, as you're saying, they're just a minority out of many other institutions who are not doing much. So I guess this is also we need to take it back to them, that to say they need to make a lot more noise. You know, because if we can only think of only 2 institutions in South Africa that are doing that, and out of the 50 other institutions that we have, then that simply says that it is not enough. Because everywhere you go in Johannesburg, every corner, every street pole, every billboard that you see, it is University of Johannesburg talking about 4IR. But exactly. As you are saying now, and in Stellenbosch, you can only, in Cape Town or in Western Cape, you can only quote one, which is Stellenbosch. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, what is it that other institutions in other parts of the country are doing as far as 4IR is concerned? I don't see much of that being happening. But I guess also it goes back to saying there's so much noise that University of Johannesburg is also still needs to be able to do, as much as they're doing the great work and the fantastic job that they're doing as far as Gauteng is concerned. Maybe it is time that they take also their marketing maybe also on a greater and a bigger height, so that everybody else gets to know that University of Johannesburg is also leading as far as 4IR is concerned.
Give you a perfect example where my mind's going, okay? Why is that not larger than, say, human resources education?
Yeah.
That needs to be, that's the future. You know, educating, there are so many people that are human resources practitioners in this country. All right. There's so many youngsters that I'm aware of that can't find work as human resources practitioners. Now, back in the 90s, I remember people saying there's this thing called HR and there's a shortage of these HR people. Now we're flooded with them.
That's
all right.
True. That's so true.
What we're seeing, that there's a shortage that people don't even know about in the 4IR space, the Internet of Things, blockchain development. In actual fact, I don't know of any universities currently that are actually teaching blockchain development. I don't know if you guys are yet. But I remember speaking to the guys at F&B, and they were importing guys from other parts of the world to come and help them with some of their apps. So, you know, we've got to realize that these things, people need to be educated. Schools need to be saying, guys, here are your options, and this is where you need to be going. And the schools aren't doing that. Schools are supposed to be educating people on what the next step is.
That is so true. I mean, also, I think I read in a couple of also media places where they were saying, when you get into UJ, it's going to be mandatory that when you get into your first year, is that you're going to have to do a course in 4IR one way or the other, irrespective of whatever field that you want to get into, which now prepares also the youth to get into that. But I think I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, what are the schools teaching also? Because now, if it's only going to be the responsibility of an institution like University of Johannesburg to do that, and these kids, they come from the backgrounds where they don't have any of this, they've never heard of this in their lifetime, and now they get into university, and that is the first time they get to hear about this. But I guess, you know, on the bright side of things, it simply says that somebody has to do something, and it has to start somewhere.
Yeah, and that conversation needs to start, because generally the conversation either starts at home or it starts at school. Kids, let's be honest. I was a kid once. When I came out of school, I didn't have a clue. I had no clue. So, you know, you kind of hear, oh, well, this sounds like it could be good, or it sounds like you could have a great career if you do that. Oh, maybe I'll study. We don't have a clue. We don't have a clue. So, and that's why I also think that there should be an additional year to getting into university. You should go to university for an additional year to learn about technology.
True. And
then learn what is the next step. If I'm going to do medicine, now, I don't know if we had this discussion earlier, but But AI right now is diagnosing cancer at a far more rapid rate and far, far more accurately than any doctor can. The legal system is now starting to be challenged in the States because they've got AI that has turned out to be better and more accurate by 25% than a judge. So we need to start understanding that this technology, it exists and we are ignoring it to our own detriment. We need kids to go into university and learn about different things in the tech space. Do I like programming? Do I like hardware? Do I like 4IR, blockchain? Do I like this? How does that apply to this industry, engineering, human resources, horticulture? How does this tech get applied to those environments? Oh, actually, I quite like horticulture and I like to see what I can do in hydroponics, because I think that hydroponic lettuce or carrots or whatever the case is the way of the future. That's the discussion that we are not facilitating because there's no exposure to the tech. And that's why I firmly believe that we need to create the environment because our youngsters are not getting exposed. So before we start saying what you want to do, what we need to be saying is that here's an additional course on technology that you need to do first and then make a decision.
Thank you so much.
The best thing to do, in my opinion.
Thank you so much for your time. We're way over time and I really, really appreciate you. And I think I have just last one question that is from Balisa Tlati. And she says, do you think South Africa is socially, economically, or infrastructure ready for automation? If not, what is your advice and on how to prepare South Africa on this technology? That is the last question that we have. And Arena has posted quite a number of interesting stuff also on their chat. So if you want to be able to read, please go and read up on that.
Yeah, I have seen something on the breast cancer diagnosis, and I'm glad she's actually put it there. I've already seen that. It's actually very interesting, and I was following that, I think, back in January or February. I saw something on that. So what I think is important is infrastructure. Right? We have a roads infrastructure in this country. It hasn't always been there, but it allowed for industry to grow. Things, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, I think the government should own certain types of infrastructure and make it cheap and affordable and accessible, like 5G. 5G is going to drive a lot, and I do think that the government should actually take ownership of that and then rent it back to companies like the Vodacoms, et cetera, et cetera. I also think that the infrastructure at university level and school level needs to be put into place. Big concern, of course, as we see during COVID, there was something like 1,000 schools that were vandalized. So how do you put in infrastructure, high cost infrastructure into a place that potentially might be vandalized? It's a big concern, but at university level, there's no excuse. We have to have it. We absolutely have to have it. And I still think that 1 year bridging course where we expose you to tech, because a lot of the youngsters aren't doing it. I know when I took my kid out of, or my kids out of their previous school in Johannesburg, their friends hadn't been exposed to it. And I've been saying I need to get my kids into a school that exposes them to technology. Now, my children are going to have an advantage. Their mates and their friends back in Joburg are not going to have the same advantage. And it's just simply because of the move. But I can see the trend. I know what's coming. I just want to make sure that there's other people that can join us in that process. I mean, it gets lonely at the top, everyone must come.
That's so true. That's so true. Thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. I'm not sure if it would be possible for you to be able to send us the presentation, if possible, so that we can share it on the UJ side and everybody can have access to it, if possible. Over to you, Theodora. That's it from me.
Thank you, Zazi. Wonderful, wonderful facilitation. Jonnathan, you know what? Some of us are scared. We fall under the category of over 55. So I think what you said about us upskilling ourselves and using that experience will help. But I'd like to thank you very much. It's food for thought. And I wish that all the government officials, educators can view this video and be able to think twice about the future of our children in South Africa, you know.
Yeah. Look, if we get this right, they've got a bright future. I do believe it. If we just take that step, I think that we could create something really beautiful, but the step needs to be taken.
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. Thank you very much, Jonnathan. And consider opening a similar school in Johannesburg. Business idea. Thank you to everybody who has attended this session. We have more sessions coming up, so please check out our social media pages and website for what's happening next. Thank you very much.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.